Hey gang, welcome back to Grace's Book Place. I'm Grace and this is my book place. We're going to do a November wrap up. I know it's a bit late. I've not been very well. If you couldn't tell, I sound weird. At least I think I do. I don't know. Let's just jump into it. The first book that I read, more like finished, but it counts, in November was Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm not going to say too much about my feelings about this because I did talk for a lengthy time about it in my November vlog, which is still not out even though it's December, so but I promise it's coming out soon, better late than never and all that jazz, so I'll talk about it in there, so I don't want to say too much here. Long story short, I enjoyed this book. I didn't love it as much as I hoped I would love it, but I enjoyed it and I enjoyed the movie, and yeah, it was a decent time. And then for November, my main reading was, I was doing Believathon. So middle grade children's books, all that jazz. I did a whole Believathon TBR with you guys, and used all the prompts and stuff. So the first book that I ended up reading in November was Shadow Forest by Matt Haig. We got this one for the read a book that has illustrations prompt. I tabbed, I don't know if you can see that, I'm going to show you. All of these orange tabs at the top here are whenever an illustration popped up, so I could sort of prove to you guys that this book counts. It has pictures in it, so all of those orange tabs are a picture, an illustration in the book. So there were actually more than I was expecting. There were 11 full-page illustrations in the book, so that's cool. I really enjoyed this. I thought I would because I really liked it as a kid, and it's just fae folk and the forest and silly fun like that. However, I'm also really glad that I enjoyed it because it in my head was this. I'd forgotten the story, but the feeling, the nostalgia was still there for this book, so I'm really glad I actually enjoyed it when I read it because I couldn't remember too much from the story. There's actually a sequel to this, I think, that I didn't know existed, called The Runaway Troll. I have no idea what that's about, but pretty sure it's set in the same world, and it's Samuel Blink and his sister and his aunt and all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm probably gonna get it because I really enjoyed this. It was a fun little recap of a childhood favourite from very early on, so early I forgot all about it. I did tab earlier on in this book a bit that I didn't love, where the main character Samuel Blink calls his little sister a cow, which when I read that at the beginning, it's about 50 pages in, so it's not the beginning, but it's early on. I didn't love that because I had a moment of being this is a middle grade book for 10 to 12 year olds maybe, or whatever. It's I don't really love the idea of teaching young boys to use sexist language like that against little girls and whatever. So that I tabbed it because I didn't like it very much that he says you're a selfish cow. But I will say it actually becomes more relevant why he calls her a cow later on. There's actually a tied in story reason for it. I still don't know how much I love it because of the nature of not really being able to have that conversation properly in a children's book. But I think kids who don't fully understand that yet might think might be fine about it because it ends up being in reference to a particular creature in the book that I think, upon reading it as an adult, is used as, it's sort of an analogy for depression. This creature, I think they're called the Huldra. They used to be human and they've since lost they can't come out in sunlight anymore, and so they've changed completely, and they used to be a very happy people who lived above ground, and now they have to live underground, and they've changed and become something scary and sad all the time. So I think, and the little sister in this story, I think, is having a serious depressive episode fueled by grief and things, because at the very beginning of the book something catastrophic quite happens, and they have grey skin and cow-like tails, and so I think that in the end, the point of him calling her a cow at that point in the story, when it was a particular moment where she's not speaking and she won't respond to him, and he feels like, they both feel like, I guess, they're going through their grief alone, but he especially feels that in that moment because she won't speak to him, and so he calls her a selfish cow, which I think overarchingly becomes more of like not an okay thing, but more understandable as a tool for telling the story, because the only other instance of like anything cow-like in the book are these creatures who seem to be a representation of depression and all of that stuff. So I didn't love that, because it's still not great to read young people calling each other like names that are steeped in sexism and gendered stereotype. But I understand why it was used, and I'm less angry at it now, but still don't know if it needed to be there at all. But that's Shadow Forest. I'm not very well at the minute. I've mentioned that already. And I haven't been very well for a while, just had this really nasty head cold. So I might just be rambling and not fully aware of what I'm saying. So that's super fun. When I'm healthy and watch this back, I will cringe a lot. So great. Second book that I read third book? Dune, Shadow Forest. Third book. The third book that I read in November was Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles. This is a Sherlock and Watson story. It's the first one I've ever properly read. I'm sure a lot of the other ones are maybe better. I didn't love this. I didn't love it. For a couple of different reasons. I guess we'll get the more serious reason out of the way. So this book is of its time. That's fine, you know what I mean? As an adult, I can read it and see some of the problematic stuff that it says from, because of it being written in a certain time and everything, and I don't have to like that, but I can look at it with an analytical eye. Yeah. Anyway, a critical eye. I could look at it with a critical eye and understand the context of that, understand my own feelings about that sort of subject matter, and that this was a different time and blah blah blah. This was included in a box set of Oxford children's books that I have had literally since I was probably 10, maybe a tiny bit older than that, but I've had it on my shelf since then. I understand that at the time, maybe, this might have been something that children would have read. I don't know if I would want my kids to read it super early. A little bit older, maybe or at least for me to be aware that they're reading it to have certain conversations. There's quite a few things in here that are I think every single one of these tabs is when something, I think basically racist was said. Not outright anyone being, it's racism's racism, isn't it? Just a lot of weird old Victorian-esque talk about anatomy and colonization and the study of people who are different to them and blah blah blah. It's a side thing. It's not really a focus of the story at all, but the characters sort of just make casual reference to, I don't know, groups of people in Africa, and so I feel like this is a book that in many respects it's fairly tame in the actual theme of the mystery and all of that stuff, but I personally, if I had children and they were starting to read this, I'd want to have some conversations about some of the language used in here, about why we don't use that language, about why it's not okay to talk about different groups of people in that way. So I probably would have those conversations if it was my kid reading this. And so maybe a part of me feels like it's a little bit of an outdated one to include in a bunch of essential classics that children should read. I don't know if it is. I think that it's a great thing to read these, and I probably will read more because I'm interested in the source material of Sherlock. I want to read some of that stuff, but I'm an adult who has fully formed opinions and knowledge of this stuff, and I know that it's not okay. So, yeah. Aside from that, I just wasn't that impressed, and maybe that's where it comes into the whole it's for kids, or at least this was deemed to be like for kids. I still think there's something to say about some of the language and the writing because of its time that might not be as accessible to some young people today, but it's not too difficult. But story-wise, like, the mystery just was, I don't know, it feels like it just wrapped up kind of boringly, which feels very like, is this Victorian? It is. Haha, it's Victorian England. It feels very Victorian to just have a suddenly like, oh, what proper, like, oh, this is what happened, big reveal without any real build-up. Obviously, like, this has serious historical, literary importance and influence and all of that stuff. But I feel like, not all, obviously, but some other mysteries that I've read, even from a similar time and everything, that decide to have twists or mysteries and like mysteries solved and stuff like that. There's a bit more of, I guess, a build up and like some red herrings, and so this just felt like it got revealed to me and I sat there and was like, okay, like that's like, oh, makes sense, cool. I don't know. I mean, the point is like that these are kids' books, and if this is actually deemed, apart from some of the other stuff I mentioned, to be some like a kid-level introduction to mystery, then that makes sense that me, as an adult who's read some better mysteries, would be like, like. So I didn't love it, but I am excited to read more Arthur Conan Doyle, just to sort of have Sherlock in the bank. The Hound of the Baskervilles was for read a short book. Just thought I should mention what that was for, and it was short. It was only 212 pages, so fairly quick read. The next book that I read in November was Stoneheart by Charlie Fletcher. I read this for read a book with a 2-word title, Stoneheart. Though actually, like, online, I think this is considered 1 word, but I didn't realise that, so that's not my fault. Anyway, I read this. This was technically a reread. I don't know if I actually finished it. Yeah, I don't know if I finished it when I was a kid. Have now, and I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. I really liked it. It was a cool story, like I said before, about statues coming to life and moving, and like the descriptions of London are really well done. And as somebody who is England based and has been to London many times, I could see a lot of the places they were talking about, and that was cool to read about. So yeah, there was only like one sort of issue I had when reading this book. Like, I feel like reading kids' books is such a minefield because everyone's going to have like a slightly different opinion on what kids should be exposed to when and all of this stuff. And for the large part, I'm like, depending on what it is and how serious the conversation is, I'm like, whatever. Like, kids need to discover certain things and you can't shield them from everything, and introducing very light themes early is not the end of the world, you know, that sort of stuff. But in this one, this book was written in, or this one was published in 2006. Yeah, it was first published in 2006. I don't know if that has any bearing off of some of this, but like, there's nothing too awful in this book. It's really straightforward, fun, action-packed tale about magic and other worlds and all that stuff. There is a bit of a thing all the way through this book that's like talks about, like, the main character George is a 12-year-old boy, and there's like a lot of moments, which I'm annoyed I didn't tab fully now, but where he's all like self-conscious about his emotions, so he won't cry, he won't let himself cry. He talks about how crying is embarrassing, like he's going for a serious ordeal. Like, the boy, like, is mourning the death of his father, which happens a little bit before the story starts, so you just know about that. But he's mourning all that, he's working through some stuff. His mum is, like, an actress who's not around him a lot, and she's travelling and leaving him alone a lot. He doesn't have many friends. And then one day, he knocks off a little dragon head from the side of the Natural History Museum, and then, like, literal gargoyles start coming to life and chasing him, and that's terrifying. You're a 12-year-old boy alone in London and statues are talking to you whilst you're also going through a lot of emotional stuff at home. So, like, it's an understandable situation to be just kind of distraught in. And every time he has a moment where he's like, he thinks he's gonna cry, he thinks he's gonna break down, he's not okay, there's like this sort of, idea of, oh yeah, but that would be so embarrassing, and he didn't do that, thank goodness, you know, like that kind of, it was just this really sort of archaic way of being all like, boys shouldn't cry, or emotions are bad. And throughout all of this, like, some of the soldiers that he meets that are friends and everything are the soldiers from the World War II predominantly, but like the World War memorials in London. So like the actual soldiers who step off their plinths. So they're some of the good guys, right? And so they step in to help quite a bit. And one of the first, I think the first statue that he talks to is the gunner, who is just a soldier from a famous memorial in London. And there's a lot of, it's very interesting as a dynamic, but like I did tab this bit that says, "Steady," said the gunner as George rolled to his feet and lunged at him. He put a shovel of a hand in between them, and George, who had been an inch away from embarrassing himself by hugging the big man in the full flush of his relief, gripped it and clenched it and pumped it up and down in gratitude and excitement. Like, come on. Like, it's not embarrassing to embrace your friend or to be excited or relieved or, like, I mean, I kind of, in that particular instance, I get it a bit more because of the fact that the gunner is a soldier and from a different time, because they sort of reflect the intention of why they were made and how they were made and when they were made and everything. But there was a part of me that was still a little bit like, it's not embarrassing. Stop using the word embarrassing every time George wants to cry or hug a friend or express any kind of emotion. So that was a bit frustrating for me. But overall, I really enjoyed the adventure. So the next book I read was the sequel, which I chose for continue a series you are already reading. And because technically I was already reading Stoneheart, I thought I'd read Iron Hand too. And I immediately continued it on because I was having a great time. It's much the same sort of thing. It's a continuation of the story. It was good. I really enjoyed it. It's really good fun. There's a couple of things that, like an outdated thing. For some reason, the author insists on referring to any homeless person as a tramp, which feels very outdated and not the best thing to say. I didn't love that. Like, just anyone who is homeless is a tramp, and I don't love that. He also makes them puppets of one of the villains. The officer coughs in embarrassment, lowers his voice a little, and for what it's worth, I blubbed like a baby all the way through my first bombardment. And so there's like a whole moment where George is sort of being encouraged by other men to feel the emotions that he feels. However, it did take a very serious and comparable to war, to an extent, basically, experience for them to be like, nah, it's alright to be upset about that. And I'm like, okay, cool, but how many instances did he have of awkwardness with everything he was going through in the first book, where everyone else around him was like, awkward, boy crying, you know, like, I don't know. But I think it's good that they included that in the second book there was a moment where grown men, even if they're statues, but grown men say to a young boy, it's okay to experience your emotions and cry. So, yeah, thought that was good. So I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, the final book wasn't on my TBR for November. I would have read it anyway if I had actually had the time to or gotten around to it, but I just didn't. So that's still on the shelf and I'll probably pick it up soon, because I really enjoyed this and I want to finish the series out. I think those are all the books that I actually finished and read for November. I did start Party Shoes. This is like read a book from your childhood, because I think I might have started reading it or read it as a kid. I didn't get past page 23 because I got a bit bored, or I just wasn't in the mood for it. I might pick it up again one day. I'm sure it's a very sweet story, but I wasn't really in the mood for a really sweet, straightforward, boring, old school story. Not boring, I think boring might be unfair, because obviously Anne of Green Gables is a really sweet, straightforward story, and I didn't find that boring at all, but I just wasn't in the mood for this one. And like, because of the time it was written again, on page 2, I tabbed because of the sexist moment, which is not like the end of the world, and I don't mind reading that because I understand it's of its time, but I also like just wasn't in the mood to sit through it. So I didn't read that one, so that's a fail. But something I'm counting as a pass, even though I didn't finish it, is I got to almost halfway through Trials of Apollo the Dark Prophecy with Caleb this month. I say this month, in November. I'm really glad that we got that far, because obviously we're both busy and doing different things at different times, and we both got on well at different points of November and stuff. So I'm really glad we actually got to do some reading of this, which was fun, and we will continue it surely in December and hopefully finish it relatively soon. So I'm counting that as a win because I didn't even know if I'd get to it at all. So that's really great. And I think that was your most recent purchase. But yeah, so that's like everything that I read, half read, did not read. For Believathon, which is really cool, I ended up reading 5 books all in all if we include June, which is fine, that's cool. My goal was to read at least 6 books regardless of what they were, so it's a shame I didn't get to finish Party Shoes, but I am also not going to force myself to read something if I don't want to, and you shouldn't either. So that's great. I really enjoyed Believathon. It was really nice to read some middle grade stuff and do all of that, and I have already put a bunch more middle grade on my my wish list for that. Just quickly at the end of this video, I'm including my TBR here because I'm not doing a TBR in December because it's my birthday month, and so I am giving myself the present of choosing what I want when I want, and I'm really enjoying it. I've already almost read 2 books in the first week of December, and I'm having a great time, just like mood reading the whole time. I might vlog a little bit to show you what I'm reading throughout the month, to show you my birthday. My birthday's on Christmas Day, so I might do a little bit of vlogging on that day, I don't know. You can join me in celebrating my birthday and just mood read with me, but either way, that's why there's no TBR video, because I'm not doing one, and I'm very excited about it. But yeah, thank you for joining me here in my book place and talking to me about books. Well, listening to me talk to you about books. Links to my Instagram and Goodreads in the description down below if you're interested in that. I'm also on Storygraph under just Grace's book place, but I can't link it, so if you're on there, look me up. Hopefully, yeah, see you next time. Bye!